Okay, let's get started. I don't think I'm going to have to rush this one, but you never know. So we're here today to update you on the various student data enrichment projects. Some of you are part of maybe the Actual Analytics Data Mart user group, and you've probably seen a lot of this. I don't know why you're in the back there, here anyway. But we're going to talk a little bit about a few different items that we've been working on, to say the least. So this is what you were promised with the presentation description. So we're going to talk about Actual Analytics Data Mart, so that's coming out of the Provost office, and the Enterprise Enriched Datasets, which is coming out of Enterprise Technology, but they really do basically the same thing, and we have a lot of the same people on both projects. So we're going to talk about what we've done in the last year, what we did before that, what we're going to be doing up in the future. And basically, I keep talking to people and seeing things in various places where student data, even at a basic level, still seems very complicated. And so I'm hoping everyone here comes out thinking, oh, I can do the basic stuff pretty easily now. Hopefully. All right, so we're going to talk about the two different teams, what was out there as of the last conference, so the old stuff, the stuff we've done since then, what we're going to be doing in the next year. We're going to talk about how you can get involved and some other resources that are out there.
Can we introduce ourselves? Maybe people
This is
don't
Sam. I'm Josh. Now you know.
know. Josh, the Josh Johnson, data architect, the only data architect for ASU. I'm Sam Carter, the Scrum Master for the EADS team, which is something we'll talk about in a minute, as well as an analyst on the EADS team who defers to Josh in all things related to data.
That's not true.
Here you go. That's out the way.
All right, so why are we telling you all this? Well, first, if you haven't seen what data enrichment is at an RWAG or all the other meetings that we've done, kind of the same slide, we're going to cover it one more time. So data enrichment is a spectrum. It's actually a couple spectrums. We're going to make it look like it's one. So at the foundational level, we have our raw transactional data. This is coming from our source systems, the PeopleSofts, the Canvas, the Alex, the everything else that you get asked to provide information on. And so what we're often doing to process that is doing a little bit of cleanup. So we might be sorting it, or arranging it, and eventually you might be doing some reporting. And the goal is to provide some sort of insights so that executives can perform actions. Right? Now the data enrichment isn't this whole process. This is more of an information enrichment spectrum. But a lot of it requires us to process data. And so data enrichment is going to do that for you up front, which we hope is a little bit more efficient. So at the raw data level, right, this is how we generally store data. This is generally how we process data. This is how operational systems work. It's very, very detailed because it's everything they need to run their operations. For storage efficiencies and reliable CRUD operations, it's usually normalized, right? So the data only exists in one place and only one place. They only have to update it in one place. It's usually pretty flexible because you have so much detail, but it's often very dirty because you only clean up for operations what you need to support operations, and you don't actually need all that data long term. So what we're doing with enrichment, we're trying to simplify it a little bit. Not necessarily all the way, right? We still want some detail. We want you to be able to do different things. We still want to be a little bit flexible. But we might do some aggregations. We're going to flatten it out. We're going to denormalize. We're going to join the data together so that you don't have to. Make it a little bit easier to use. The data might be more specific to different use cases. So if you're doing a specific type of analysis or a specific type of reporting, there might be a data set that is specific to what you're doing. Again, we're making that data appear in many places. And then we're going to clean the data, we're going to standardize the data, and that's probably the biggest focus of what we're going to talk about today. All right, so, okay, cool, you're doing all this stuff. Is it worth it? Well, here's generally how we look at things today. we're saying that analysts spend about 60% of their time cleaning, wrangling, and doing their own data enrichment. 60%. Now, if you're hired on as a data scientist, you're getting paid a lot of money. You're not probably functioning efficiently if you're spending more than half your time cleaning up the data. And 60% is probably generous there. I've heard a lot of people say 80, 90%. Right? So you're spending maybe a quarter of your time actually doing what you're hired to do because there's all those other things you have to do. So what are we trying to do? We're trying to flip that script. We want to make very, very small part of your job fussing with data. Right? You're still going to have to learn how to find it. You're going to have to learn how to use it a little bit. We might even ask you to contribute a little bit of your time to helping us improve it. But really, we want you to use the data. We want you to help other people use the data. We want you to share the data with other people. So that's what we're trying to do. All right.
Okay, next. Okay, so we have two teams within ASU Enterprise. One is Actionable Analytics. They are student data enrichment only, so that means that they're only going to worry about things related to student data. They are led out of the provost office. Phil Curia is the, I think, lead of that team. Then we have EADS, Enterprise Enrichment Data Sets. We enrich all data domains. So we will work together with Actionable Analytics, I should say, sometimes and do student data, we'll do business and finance data, we'll do any data that's out there, even though Josh doesn't want to. We will do that. We will try to make those things enriched for you guys. That's led out of Enterprise Technology, or ET, and the lead of this team is Elizabeth Riley. And like I said before, I'm the Scrum Master, and Josh is pretty much our data consultant. So for EADS and some kind of way Actionable Analytics, we use Scrum, but we fully use Scrum for our EADS team, and it works very, very well, I think. We do 2-week sprints. However, we do not allow Josh to have a ticket because they won't close. So I am very much someone who's really concerned with velocity because we want to put out valuable information at least once a quarter. So we are constantly putting out new enriched tables, which we'll talk about, and we put them out in phases. So we'll group things like, this is what we can do the first quarter, this is what we can do the second quarter, and we'll do a phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. That is great for us and you because as we do the phases, we're just adding on columns to existing objects that we've created, but you guys then have a valuable product in the meantime so that you can start working on just the data and not the wrangling. One of the things that Josh didn't mention when he was talking is that when we use those EADS, or not EADS, but those enriched tables, they have so much information. And when we, at least for the EADS team, I can't speak for Actionable Analytics, but for the EADS side, we put a lot of thought into how people can use this data. And we are very strategic on which data we are enriching. So we just don't go around saying that one, this one, that one. We do look at what is valuable for the data community, what are people using, and how can this improve the quality of life for our data community citizens. So that is something that he didn't talk about, that he is like very good at it. He does the whole future. I'm the dictator, and I'm just like, no, we don't need to do it. But Josh will look at the future and say, hey, but what if? And that's all a part of cleaning that data and denormalizing it for your use. So it is very strategic and very intentional.
Thank you, Sam. For anyone who was at my presentation yesterday morning, you might have just caught that you might not want to trust the Jira data coming out of our project because Sam's artificially manipulating it by leaving my tickets off the board. So, the more you know.
Just don't give him tickets. Don't work to be assigned to Josh. Oh, let's.
Yeah, talk about that.
Okay, so this is something that Josh created, but Kayla Fordyce and I named. So you won't be able to Google this and figure out what it is. This is trademarked for ASU. So this is what we call our EODD. This is our Enrichment Object Dependency Diagram. So what you're seeing right now, you guys can't see it very well. It's a little bit fuzzy, but this is our kind of roadmap on how we're enriching student data. So if you see at the top, what's included in this dependency diagram is the person table, class table, course tables, track cloud, instructor tables. And we show how they're all dependent on each other and how they all weave together. And once we start working on one, we'll know, okay, now this is going to feed into this one, this is going to feed into that one. So we're able to quickly identify areas where we have dependencies and we need to go back and figure out, okay, let's do this student instructor class before we do student instructor term, but we have information that actually needs to be on a different, like maybe one of those maroon ones. We stop and we know we have to realign. So this is super helpful. Josh put this together. I follow it like it's the Bible. And we also have created a secondary one, which is a direct path. We have some learning at scale work that we needed to do, and it became a priority. So we pushed out, or we kind of extracted some of the tables that we were doing that were directly related to learning at scale. Again, this shows us the dependencies of each object and how we move forward or backwards. This is not a linear process because we sometimes circle back. So this is super helpful. If anybody wants to know more about it, just ping Josh.
Yeah, so there's a couple things this does. It does help us identify what the dependencies are, so we can do things in the right order, a little bit more efficient, less rework. But if we do get one of those requests from the top and we have to kind of do just the maroon part first, it shows us how much rework there's going to be involved, how many things have to be updated after the fact. It can also help to identify circular dependencies in the ETL process. So if table A depends on table B and table B depends on table A, you're going to need a more advanced ETL design. So it helps us to at least reduce those, if not eliminate them.
And I think too, it also helps eliminate technical debt or mitigate technical debt.
Yes, by building them in the right order and doing it efficiently. Okay, so let's talk about what we had last year. You can always go back to last year's presentation, but maybe there's something different this time, who knows? So we have a grade dimension. Pretty simple, essay grade. You have one line per grade code. A grade's like an A+, or a W, or an EN, or X, or all those fun letters that all mean different things. And within that table, you're going to see how many grade points are associated with that. How do we kind of describe that? Is it a positive or a negative thing? And there's lots of flags for different thresholds. Does it meet this threshold? Does it meet this other threshold? So if you want to calculate, a DEW rate, stuff like that, there's flags that can help you do that a little bit more simply. We have a race and ethnicity dimension. This one's been out there a little bit, but it's still a little bit hard to use. So in the common schema, ASU race ethnicity. The key for this is a single field, which is a list of race and ethnicity codes. If you're not familiar with our list, be prepared. There are lots of tildes involved. Now, I said a little hard to use. There is a snippet in the SQL repository that will give you some SQL that creates these values and assigns it to an MPL ID. And you can always put that in your query and then join to this table. Shortly down the road, we're going to have a table called ASU person. This is the very beginning stages of creating something that's going to look hopefully a little bit better than our most popular table, PS ASUD person view. We're going to be doing it a little bit differently. We're going to have change capture, all that fun stuff. But eventually we'll just have a code in there that you can join to this dimension. Easy peasy. In this table, you're going to find those top level codes and descriptions, so the letters you're probably familiar with, how those generally get described. There's going to be a flag for quote unquote international, the way it's defined for iPads and currently in D-Person View. There's going to be codes that you'd find like in D-Person View for the iPads reporting. We also created a couple different derivations of those for different use cases. And then the most important thing, the main reason we built this dimension to begin with, is it has inclusive flags. So no longer are you going to be stuck reporting on students, staff, faculty as two or more. We're not out, and we're going to show you exactly what is included, what someone's identifying as. So if you want to identify all the Asian students, you can do that. They're not going to be bundled. And then we also have underrepresented minority and minority flags, and there's a couple different options depending on how you want to treat international. Right, class dimension, SA class. Currently, we only have versions of this for change capture. So if you want just today's data, just the current data, there's a couple of filters you have to apply depending on which one you're using, and we have resources to help you with that. Shortly, very shortly, we're going to have a version that's just today's data as well. So class ID, that's just a concatenation of what you're familiar with as S-term and class number. We want a single value, so it has all the information, makes joins a little bit easier. And shocker, it contains information about classes. That's all you really need to know. If you know PS class table, ASUA class, the external version, it's kind of got all that same information, maybe a little bit more. Some things maybe we didn't find as useful or they weren't included. Term dimension. This is one of my favorite tables out there. I think it's one of Sam's favorites now too. Absolutely. So we have the base version. We call it the base version when it's not change capture, the current version. But we also have change capture. So if you want point in time history, if you want to see what the current term was on date X, you can use those as well. One row per term, again in that base table. And yeah, information about terms and current term flags. And there are several different versions of what the current term is to support several different use cases. So it can take a little bit to get used to. You're going to want to check out the documentation on this one before you use it probably. But it can be very, very useful for automating. And I think went into a bit of detail in one of the SQL support meetings on how to use the different flags in that manner as well.
Wait, we didn't talk about DT. SADT.
Isn't that EADS?
Is it?
You didn't list it.
Oh,
We also have a date dimension, one row per date. It's like a calendar, and it takes a lot of the values from SA term. So it's going to tell you on this date what was the current term, what was the next term, what was the last term, all that fun stuff, as well as many more things. It's a very wide table, a very long table, but again, potentially very useful for automation. All right, so those were what we called the dimension tables, even though they're not technically dimensions in the traditional way. And these are what we call proactive tables. Okay, so student groups. Student group, currently, again, we only have the change capture version. You got to apply some filters to get today's logic, or today's values. The grain, one record per student per group. It is only for students who are currently assigned to the groups. Once they're taken out of the group, it just disappears. But again, we have change capture, so you know when it happens. We have which students are in which groups, obviously, very important, but also what's the description for the group. And we create some flags around some of the more common groups, such as Barrett, which has some fairly complicated logic and PeopleSoft to figure out, so we just kind of do that for you. Service indicators. Again, we don't have that base table yet. We have the change capture. A lot of people, I think, go into the service indicator data thinking the keys are student ID and service indicator code, but they're not. It is the service indicator date time, and they can actually change which code a service indicator is. Fun. One of the reasons we created change capture is to see how often that happens. We have also some filters or flags that you can use as filters and service indicators for lots of different disciplinary holds and holds that affect enrollment, all the traditional things you've seen across ASU since the days of the old retention dashboard. Okay, so in Canvas, Canvas data gets a little bit complicated, and it gets a little more complicated once you join it to PeopleSoft. So we've created some crosswalks to help you do that. We have one for people and one for classes, and they are the person PeopleSoft Canvas crosswalk and the class PeopleSoft Canvas crosswalk. And you join those systems together using these. You can. We're going to have a presentation that covers these in much more detail coming up in like half an hour or so.
Do you want to talk about what proactive means?
Well, clearly it's a facial cleanser.
Proactive does not mean proactive, but he's going to tell us what and this is another thing that Josh came up with himself, so you won't be able to Google this.
No, and if it sounds ridiculous, you get to blame me. So we have proactive, core, reactive, and dimensions. Reactive are kind of at the top end of that enrichment spectrum. So these are generally more aligned with specific use cases. These proactive tables are meant to be much more generic, much more flexible, more representative of raw business processes. The core tables are kind of in the middle. They're built on a specific grain, and they aggregate that proactive data to that desired grain. So that's what they are. Again, RLUG enrichment presentation. Check it out. Canvas activity. So anyone who's tried to use this table has probably found out you do not want to just throw it into an Alteryx input and let it run, because it will run forever until your workspace crashes. We've got billions of records. So we made a copy of what is called the caliper data coming out of Canvas. So it's event level, again, billions of records. And we did a little bit of tweaking, and again, feel free to check out the next presentation to figure out a little bit of what we did there. But there are some specific use cases, and there's some stuff to just make it a little bit easier to use generically. Oh, look, we got more proactive stuff. DARs. We have some DARs tables. Haven't used them. Don't really know anything about them. So it's highlighted for Sam to fill it in. Then I found out this morning she doesn't know either.
But Sam also sleeps at 5 o'clock in the morning when he did this, so.
Yeah, blame. If you want to know about DARS data, talk to Haley.
Absolutely.
I think there's also a Slack channel for that. In contact data, so this is the phone service used by our call centers, and we did some stuff with that. Again, I don't really know what was done there. Okay, there you go.
So for in contact data, we did a couple of different things because we wanted to figure out what the call volume is for the EC, which is it enterprise? I don't know what it means because now I just know the acronym. So the help center. Experience Center, thank you very much. So we wanted to know the volume, and we had to figure that out by bringing in that data, but the data is a little bit messy. So we enriched the data so that we could easily pivot that data to figure out how many calls did we get, how many calls were dropped, how many calls were abandoned, how many representatives, how many calls did each representative take? Like all of that is in that dashboard. It is a very, I think, reactive table, not proactive, because it's really reacting to a use case specific to Experience Center. But he has it in proactive, so he made it up. I'm not gonna argue it.
It's a spectrum. Mobile app events. I have seen these tables at least. I kind of know what's in them. It's a log, yeah. Mm-hmm. Stuff that happened in the mobile app. Mm-hmm. Probably billions of records again, yeah.
Oh yeah, that will break your AWS.
Yeah, so we did something with that. If you need mobile app event data, it's there. Orientation. So orientation comes if you've looked at the ASU orientation schema. There's some tables that start with YR and some tables that start with OR, and they all have stuff in them, and it's not entirely clear how to put them together. So we created some views that put them together for you and can be helpful for certain use cases.
Use with caution, though.
Yeah, we're not totally sure how accurate they are.
Yeah. We didn't do it.
I know, no, Twyla's not here, but Twyla's currently playing with that data and having all kinds of fun. All right, now we get to the core tables. These are my favorite. Good balance of flexibility and cleanliness. All right, so we got student level data. These are a couple tables we did pretty early on. It's change capture specifically for student level data, and we did a couple different data domains. So we split the data kind of by columns, which we don't normally do, but it was for storage efficiencies. So we have one for academic data, one for biodemo data, and I highlighted the schema a little bit there because it's the ASU student analytics schema, not the ASU student schema. So it's got a little bit more restricted permissions. We're going to talk a little bit about how this data is going to be accessible through ASU Student pretty soon, hopefully, or at least most of the data, the stuff that's not sensitive. 1 row per student, as I said, it's got lots of different stuff in it. So lots of academic aggregations, service indicator, student group, like a list of all the groups and indicators they have today, flags for all the important ones. We've got some addresses that you don't normally get with LMS addresses or LMH addresses. We've got who their advising groups are, although I heard from Steve that I might need to tweak that logic a little bit. We've got lots of different GPAs in there. We have what we're calling the cohort now. This is not necessarily the cohort that you might see in IA tables that were recently taken out of the warehouse, but it's the one we're going to be using for things like the new campaign builder application, and we think this one should be useful to people going forward. What their financial balances are at ASU, a couple different WICHE groups, both the grad and undergrad versions, what their citizenship, visa, housing, holds. I mentioned the service indicators, but you've probably seen the FERPA hold in PS ASUD Person View. So we've got a version of that here. The Salesforce Contact ID for anyone who needs to map to Salesforce easily. If you ever see a 1 followed by a G, that is our abbreviation for first gen. This is probably my favorite column in the table because it takes almost all the first gen data out of the application. We found out about one more application variation that wasn't captured in our logic, so that'll be the next round, as well as the FAFSA first gen, and puts it all into one flag.
Can I ask a question about that one?
Yeah, go for it.
You mentioned that some of these fields are in other tables that you've already talked about, like student group codes and service indicators. How would we know if we should be using these or if we should be using that?
So it really depends on your use case, because the student group service indicators in the proactive table, it's a very different grain, right? It's 1 record per student per group, 1 record per student per service indicator. And so that data structure can be useful in certain cases, whereas here we have 1 record per student. So in your traditional, I need a report of students who, blah, 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 this is generally easier. But if you want, a specific combination of student groups, things like that, you might want to use the other one. Yeah, good question, but
Good, though.
yeah, they're all awesome.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong, really. Student year, so we're going to have, again, no base table at the moment, also in the student analytics schema, but it's 1 record per student per year. What's a year? Well, it's AY, so you can call it age year, you can call it academic year, and in either case, you are correct, because they are the same thing. It's mostly financial aid data, so you got some FAFSA stuff. This will be expanded down the road, but it can be useful for those. And again, change capture. Student term, so 1 record per student per term. Again, we have the change capture, and this was as of last year, so we do now have a base table for this. We didn't at the time. So lots of stuff from the, I mentioned SR 0189 and not SPRF because it also has the SBYT. It does not have the CUR. It's got some financial aid information, registration flags of various types, registration dates, relative dates. It's a convenient place to find when was a student able to register for the term, because that can get a little complicated. So it's just there for you. That was actually an ETL nightmare. So you're welcome. Again, more service indicator flags and stuff, more housing information at the student term level. And we also have the persistence predictions coming out of the actionable analytics predictive models in there. So if you've seen those in the Salesforce student profile page, you can also find them in the warehouse right here.
Does everyone know what change capture means? Does anyone not know? Maybe we should just say it because somebody might not want to say it.
They just want to raise their hand.
Do you want to just talk about
So if you've used the warehouse and you've seen any of the tables that end with SNP, I've got SSNP up here, but just the regular SNP, that's like a daily snapshot. So we've got a base table and then we snapshot it every single day so that you can see when things change. We're capturing the same information, we're capturing it a little bit differently. So the SCT, it only captures a snapshot when something's changed. So we don't have redundant data. And the SSNP takes that change capture data and transforms it to look like a snapshot. So that's a simulated snapshot. It's just a view on top, but it looks just like a normal SNP table. So change capture is just, here's what it looked like as of this day. If you're building point-in-time predictive models, say, these are very useful. It can be very hard to create point-in-time data and often impossible because it doesn't exist elsewhere. All right, student class. So student class, we will have a base table for this shortly. 1 record per student per class. It's kind of like the PS student enroll table, but we've changed the grain. We've eliminated ACAD career. So if you happen to have a record where a student enrolled in the same class under 2 different careers, we're going to tell you which one's better, and we're just going to give you that one. Because they really can't take the class under both careers. So we've got some logic to tell you which one's more appropriate. We also have some ASR aggregations, so academic status reports. These are the weekly grades, essentially, that they get. So we'll tell you what their most recent grade is in that class before they have an official grade. I think we might tell you if that changed in the last week, things like that. All right, so cool. You are all caught up to a year ago. All right, there's a lot more.
That's because I came this year, so now work's getting done. Yeah.
That's actually
Now
pretty true.
I pushed Josh out, and I said, we're gonna start working on it. No, I'm joking, I'm joking.
So yeah, in the last year, we've done a lot. We have some brand new stuff. That's a band called Brand New, if you didn't know. I told you about the person crosswalk, and I told you about the class crosswalk. Now we have a person class crosswalk. It's an all-in-one solution, just for you guys. So it's out there, and it looks kind of like you'd expect it to look based on the names that you saw in the last ones. It just combines them. And again, there's another presentation. We're going to talk about this. But it's better than what was in there before, most of the time. We have a new table for Canvas assignment submissions. So in the learning schema, just like all the other Canvas stuff, there's some couple keywords in there, right? Published, submission. The Canvas data around this can be a little bit complicated. It's not always well named, so we're trying to be a little bit more specific with this.
So that just
But-
means the names are gonna be super long now, so.
I mean, so with Canvas, we tried not to abbreviate quite as much as we do with PeopleSoft, just because people aren't as familiar with it. And because we aren't doing as much data enrichment there, we still kind of wanted to be clear how you join it to other data coming out of Canvas from the raw level. So when you see assignment, it's because it's called assignment in Canvas. Also, Canvas doesn't randomly abbreviate things in different ways like PeopleSoft does. So they'll always call it assignment, so we might as well just stick to that. Whereas PeopleSoft, you never know what you're going to get.
This is true.
So we have an ASR object. I mentioned the academic status reports. This is a proactive table, so it's 1 row per student per report. And there's flags for what the most recent release is for the student in the class. We've done some demoralization, brought in some descriptions, done some aggregation for the, what is it, is it status and reason? Phil, status and reason? Yeah? Action and reason, okay. Status and reason's like everything else in PeopleSoft. Here we have an action and reason. So it's the reason the student got that grade at that point in time, and then the action they are suggested to take. And so the grain of those is a little bit different than the actual report because it's one to many. And so we did, again, a list, tildes. We do some data cleaning, and we also created a sequence number for the ASR that's relative to the term start instead of the session start. So in PeopleSoft, it's stored by session. We thought it'd be nice to look at how the grades in session B compared to the grades in session C, potentially, which overlap, and we want to put them on an even playing field. So here's a number for that. And the grade sentiment from the grade dimension, is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it a neutral thing? Now you know. All right, so Sam's favorite tables. We're getting into the summary tables. Student class summaries up first. This is one we are about to start working on again, but we did a version last year, so this is where we stand. So now, you might remember, essay student class was in the analytics schema. Now we're in the student schema. So we're taking a lot of the data that we had in the analytics and saying, we're going to break the current version out, and we're going to give it to everybody. Well, everybody who's taken FERPA training and stuff. So based on the same thing, we kind of took that, we did the current version, and then we brought in more, right? So we're saying, you know, someone using this table might also want to know if this is a passing grade or not, or if this is a DW grade or not. So we're joining it to the grade dimension and bringing in a lot of those flags so that you don't have to.
Deviation is on this one, I think.
Well, that's upcoming.
Oh, no, it's not there now.
Oh, for the grades, not the LMS stuff, yeah. So you know how that grade compares to other students in the class, potentially as well. We're going to be bringing in student term level details. So what plans were they in at this point? What was their primary plan? What colleges? All that stuff. Were they an honor student? So this is going to be kind of that one-stop shop for not just the student class level data, but also anything at maybe a higher level, which you might want to use at the same time. So we're just going to put it all in one place for you.
Yeah, I just lied. This table does not have standard deviation. This class summary that has standard deviation.
Foreshadowing. Oh, look, class summary. So essay class summary. Now, essay class was already in students, so no big change here. But we do have just the current data again. And we've got more aggregation, so we're taking those grades from student class summary and doing aggregation. So what percentage of the grades in this class were an A? What percent of the grades were passing? What was the DW rate? Actually, I don't think DW rate's in there yet. Anything with the denominator's not actually in there yet, because the denominators get a little bit tricky. Everyone has different opinions on what that denominator should be.
Everyone meaning Josh. He argues with himself about it, so.
I argue with Sam about it. All right, so, hey, look, we did not just that stuff, we did other stuff this year too. We've got a base table for student term, as I mentioned, so you don't have to worry about filtering out the change capture. We also have a relatively new table, which combines the admissions stack, so prog, plan, subplan, joins them all together, brings in some descriptions for status, reason, action again? Descriptions for the plan and the prog and all that stuff. And then we throw in a couple flags, so anyone who wants to get just the most recent record or just the maximum effective date can do that without having to write a row number function or a ranking function. There's just a flag to filter on. So SQL support, talked about the clearinghouse data, talked about that at RWUG as well. So if you don't know what the clearinghouse is, go watch one of those. We've got a DARS crosswalk now. I think this is to help you use the dprog value. It wouldn't surprise me. I haven't seen it. Wasn't on the project team, but I'm thinking DARS crosswalk, it's probably something to do with dprog because that can get complicated and doesn't really exist anywhere. Salesforce cases was done for, again, the enrollment center, or not, the experience center. Ed Plus still lives with me. And we did more with the in-contact data as well, also for them. I believe there's some natural language processing and stuff happening around this data, and that's the primary driver for the enrichment. And then that last table there, all you guys probably need to know is that ET right there stands for enterprise technology. So if you're not doing project management with Jira data for enterprise technology, you don't care about that. Sam loves it. Okay.
If you want to know your team's resource and capacity, that's the table to use.
In ET.
In ET. We probably should put Jira in there somewhere. But,
It's got PPS.
okay.
All right, so not only do we build new stuff in the last year, we actually updated some stuff we already had because it's never good enough. So we did a phase 2 on that massive activity table I was talking about. We had some feedback from the financial aid group, who was one of our primary stakeholders for this table, that some of the records maybe weren't being treated the way they'd like them to. So Paul did a lot more digging and found another way for us to improve this data. And so there's a new flag in there trying to identify what's a event from the user versus an event from the backend, the system, because the system makes it look like it's all the user. And then you realize, hey, that person didn't do 10 things all in the exact same millisecond. Some of that might have been Canvas. So there's a flag to help with that, and we also helped the return to Title IV flag for financial aid by working that logic into their flag as well. Phase 3 of student term, we added that base table. We added more records from student profile, specifically the primary record stuff. I believe the next round we're doing some of the non-primary. We have critical tracking flags in term, which you get from SBYT, I believe. Lots of term registration dates, registration statuses, service indicator counts, not just flags, but counts if you want to know how many registration holds they have. Now you know. Graduation information, did they apply, have they graduated, that kind of stuff you get from student profile. But we've also, again, this is student term, so we've taken out the prog, the plan, the subplan, and also done some roll-ups. So did they graduate in this term for any of their majors, for any of their careers? More housing information than we had before, and we also created some columns to help with any satisfactory academic progress tracking. Canvas discussions, so we mentioned the assignments. We also have a table, courtesy of Paul, on discussion data. It is standardizing the discussion data to kind of meet our designs. We changed the data structure. This is an update to an earlier object. We also renamed it, so that's why the name's actually on this one. So we renamed it. It's structured very differently. It now has a separate row in the table for the first post, the actual discussion starter. That used to just kind of be added on to all the other records. So it's, you now actually kind of look at it and you see the conversation as it appears in Canvas. Campaign Builder, so another actionable analytics product. That data is now in the ASU student campaign schema. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be publicizing this. Phil, we good? Yeah, okay. Can they request access to this?
I don't know if it's on the form yet, but
Okay.
if you need access to it, just send me a note.
That's Phil Arcaria. All right, cool. So we've talked about everything we did in the last year. Probably missed some stuff. We probably did like an update to the date dimension, and Sam forgot to put that on the list. But that's most of it.
Yeah, that's most of it.
But as last year, we did more than the year before. Next year, I'm hoping we do more than we did this year. So let's take a look at what that looks like. Not a whole lot of detail on these slides. Depending on time, we might click into our documentation, because I kind of wanted to show you what that looks like for your reference. So I talked about the admissions stack. We're going to basically do the same thing for the ACAD stack, so the post-matriculation data. Joining ACAD Prog, ACAD Plan, ACAD Subplan, bringing in all the descriptions, creating the flags for max effective dating. This one has a bonus logic for filling in the missing Adam Apple number values. So if you want to tie the stack data back to the applications, there's a couple assumptions we make to do that, because we don't know for sure, but they seem to be pretty logical assumptions. So it'll help you fill in some null values, hopefully. So talked about the term dimension. Well, if you care about sessions as well, now there's the term session dimension. It is not structured the way Ed Plus would like it to be structured. Sorry, but we're getting closer. We'll have a separate row for session A, session B, session C, dynamic session, and all those fun variations we had pre-ABC dynamic. So I went many years thinking TW1 stood for 2-week session 1, and then it was like, why wouldn't it just be a 2? Because it's 5 and 7 and 8. And someone pointed out it's probably 10. And when you look at the dates, it's 10. So we had 10-week sessions as well. But all those are in there. We've got lots of dates, everything we could pull out of PeopleSoft, many, many hours of validation on the archived academic calendars online. That was a lot of fun. So if you wanted to know what the drop date was for something in spring of 2005, this is where you go. Student term career. So if you're familiar with PS student car term, this is an extension of that. We're going to be adding a change capture component. We're going to be adding lots of other types of registration flags, some residency stuff, things that are kind of naturally at the student term career level. I talked about ASU person. This is going into a new schema, ASU HR student. If you're familiar with ASU Common, it's anyone who has HR or student access. And we're saying, hey, there's some stuff that probably shouldn't be out there. We're going to make sure people have HR and student access. So it's similar, but different. This is where we're going to have race, ethnicity. I think we have citizenship.
Stuff with PII data.
Yeah, and it's 1 row per person, so we're going to have names and addresses and phone numbers and emails and lots of the stuff you get ID person view. But more variations, hopefully a little bit cleaner. All right, so we're doing another round of SA class at the moment as well. We're creating that base table so that you don't just have the change capture. We'll have that current data. And we're adding a lot to this one as part of phase 2. That might be one we jump into the documentation for. New table, SA instructor class, so 1 record per instructor per class. This is based on the PS class instructor table. And it's got roles and stuff like that. And we've done some aggregations on the meeting pattern table as well, so you can see what days of the week was this teacher teaching the class. What was their first day teaching it? What was their last day teaching it? We may or may not have, like, how many hours did they teach this class on according to the schedule? Next phase? Okay. It's a little bit more complicated. Are we doing LMS data in that one? Or, no. Okay. Summary table will have it. We're doing another round of updates to the crosswalk for classes. And again, if you want to know more about why we're doing this, there's a meeting for that. We're bringing in tutoring data, so not just the track cloud, which is the system that
The math community using, formerly known as UASP. I don't know.
UASP.
MCS, I don't know.
Yeah, so the academic success program.
Yeah,
So yeah, math and English and all that stuff is kind of in track cloud. And then we're also getting the data from engineering, from their tutoring center as well. And we're going to put it all into one big old pile for everybody.
So this is kind of cool. Can I?
This is kind of cool because this will be the first time we'll have all 4 tutoring centers in the warehouse. So any possible place a student can go to get tutoring, we now have that data run. We will have that data running into the warehouse, and we're going to enrich that so you can see several different levels. I think we have an activity table that we're going to do, and then we have a session table I think that we'll do. So it's going to really be cool and give you guys a lot more information on what the students are doing, and give you a correlation maybe between their grades and the impact of tutoring.
Yeah. And then hopefully we're going to be kind of aggregating that further into those core tables. So the summary tables at the student class level especially, student term level possibly, student level maybe. And I believe there's one caveat with this in that the math tutoring data, not great.
It's not great, but it'll be in there
It'll be there. Just,
with the caveat.
pound of salt. So we talked about the mobile app events. We're now doing mobile app push notifications, which is worse than the math tutoring data. It's lots of fun. So glad I got roped into that one. We're doing so we're calling the core tables for the applications. So it's going to be 1 row per application. There's going to be one that has data that's common to both grad and undergrad, and then there's going to be tables for data that's just for grads and a table that's just for undergrads. And so those will hopefully be out in the next, let's say, few months. Student class phase 2, so again, we're creating that base table. Yes, it's still in the analytics schema, but this is what drives the summary table that's in the student schema. We're doing a little bit in this table, but largely focused on leveraging the work that we did with the term session dimension and the essay class table. So we're going to be creating enrollment flags. So was this student registered in this class or enrolled in this class past the drop deadline, past the tuition reimbursement deadline, past the class withdrawal deadline, past the session withdrawal deadline, up until the end of the class. So we're going to have lots of stuff around that. Timing, how many days before the class started did they register? How many days relative to class start did they withdraw or drop, which we call remove in the data. It's inclusive of both. All right, so that's stuff that was currently in progress. Here are the things that are going to be coming up after that, most likely. So I mentioned we only have the change capture tables for student group, service indicators, and student year. We're going to be remedying that and creating some base tables for those. I think a couple of those, or at least one of those, might actually already be in progress. I mentioned the ASU person that is in the new HR student schema. We're going to have a view of that in global for everyone who doesn't have both HR and student access, but we're going to be removing, like, students who have FERPA holds on their records. They shouldn't be in the directory data, for instance. We're going to take out some of the columns that are a little bit more sensitive, such as the race ethnicity column. HR probably wants us to take out age. I think that's the thing with them. We're going to have more summary tables. So class summary phase 2. We're going to have a student term level summary, student level summary. So again, all these tables that are kind of right now hidden in the analytics schema will have the current data in the student schema. Course topic term. So now we're getting into the tables that are a little bit more reactive, a little bit more specific to learning at scale requests. But for anyone who wants to do course analysis, this is probably going to be the easiest way to do that. So course topic as well as just the course level. So, if you really want to know about the different versions of Math 354, you can look at the topic. And if you don't, you can use the non-topic version. We're going to be doing more admissions data. One of our downstream goals is to essentially recreate the master list in the warehouse, but with hopefully some helpful improvements along the way. We're going to look at student testing data and other pre-ASU data, such as high school competencies, and make that a little bit more accessible, a little more visible. We talked about instructor class. We're going to have instructor term as well. So how many classes did the instructor teach? How many students were in those classes on average? How much time did they spend in Canvas? Who knows? Another round of student term, and the big one here that everyone will hopefully appreciate is we're also going to be building a military dimension to use with this. This will be the only thing you can use the dimension with, but it's going to build in all of the fancy Chris Smith logic, student groups and service indicators, and if those change in the near term, then we'll capture that as well, hopefully. We're going to be doing another round of the student level data, specifically for change capture on what we are calling student agents. So I talked about how the student table currently has the advising committees or individuals for students. We're looking at other people that students interact with on campus that are, they have a specific relationship with. It's not, oh, they might have walked into this building at some point. It's, there's a system that says this person's assigned to this person, and capturing all those relationships as well. 4 minutes, okay. I said we had enough time, and I lied again. And then we're going to be creating a simulated snapshot table that kind of combines all the different types of student data that we're doing change capture with separately into one table that just kind of resembles the one row per student. EOS has career services data, such as Handshake, career milestones data, the Sun Devil sync system, that data is in the warehouse, and we're going to be working on various levels of enrichment for each of those, potentially then taking that proactive work and aggregating it into our core tables, such as we're doing with the tutoring data, hopefully. One of my wish list items is change capture on checklist items, because if you've ever had to use the audit table, that's no fun. We're talking about getting the master data management into the warehouse, and once we have that, probably doing some change capture on that. And a student journey table, which is still a little bit to be defined, but you can kind of think of it as along the lines of the journey starts with that cohort column that I was talking about earlier. So each time a student kind of comes back in a different form, grads one, undergrads another, maybe a second bachelor's is another. It kind of restarts this process, and we capture information about it along the way, persistence, graduation, all that fun stuff. All right, so how can you get involved? We like people. People are cool, usually. We have the Data Mart users group, which may be renamed the Student Data Enrichment users group at some point in the near future, because we now have EADS as well on board. We have a channel for that, which is going to be made public pretty shortly here, hopefully, possibly renamed. We'll see. We're always looking for feedback on all of the assets that we just told you about. So if you have feedback, go pop it in the Slack channel, DM us, whatever. If you don't like something, say something. Always looking for developers, and if you're requesting something, we especially like you to help with development. You can always build your items in user databases, kind of work on your logic, prove it out, test it out, work in your reports, make sure it looks good, and then maybe we put it into the warehouse. Resources, oh man, this is a long slide. Okay, so links.asu.edu/student data enrichment. Currently, it's going to take you to a Google Sheets that has kind of a list of all the things that I just showed you with descriptions and dates and all that fun stuff. We also have an analytics page currently, which is a little bit out of date, but it also has some other links on it, such as documentation on how to use the SCTs and SSNPs, a list of our naming conventions in case you're not quite sure what something means. We have the EADS Confluence documentation on that project. We have now a request form. So if you'd like to see something added, there is a way to do that. And we have lots of prior presentations, 2020 conference, 2021 conference, 2022 conference. Hey, look, I'm doing this every year. And we had a bonus RWAG session this year. We have the data dictionary in the analytics portal. Of course, it might be a little out of date. We also have the Redshift enrichment forms that feed the data dictionary, previously known as the Calibra forms, also probably a little bit out of date. And we have our development documentation, which I had a bunch of links to earlier, and I was going to show you. Don't have time for that. That's never out of date, because we need that to make it happen. Hey, look at that. We made it.